Welcome back. Federal agencies will create centralized systems to track contracts, grants, and other types of payments. A new White House executive order says agencies will work with their DOGE leads to build the systems. Eileen Vidrine is founder and CEO of Vidrine Advantage. She's former chief data officer at the Air Force. Nick Hart is president and CEO of the Data Foundation. He's former senior program examiner at the Office of Management and Budget. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining me. Nick, I start with you. What's your sense of the current health and quality of the data that's going to feed those systems that agencies will build?
Well, Francis, we've been working for quite literally decades to improve the quality of data that government is collecting and managing, and suffice it to say there are plenty of gaps in the quality of that data, but there's a lot of really high quality information that government agencies have. So it's going to be really all over the map. The data quality from spending information in many agencies based on a major law that was passed back in 2014 has been drastically improved using a set of data standards that the Department of Treasury and the Office of Management and Budget have been working to implement. And based on reports from the Government Accountability Office, drastic improvements have happened. However, there are major gaps. We also know when we look at contracts and grants that are being implemented around the federal government, there's plenty of information that we'd rather have that we don't around things like outcomes. So in many cases, the things that we may want to know about the quality of the information that's coming back to government may not actually exist in the way that we want to analyze the big picture questions around what's working and what's not. So in many ways, some of these big picture questions that the DOGE and the teams and agencies are struggling with, the questions may still need better answers. So we've got to really look hard at the information that's available.
Eileen, welcome. I think Nick stole the word gaps from you as we were talking before we went on the air. That's one of the issues that you're tracking, not just in your time as CDO of the Air Force, but now that you're on the other side, helping organizations all across government trying to figure out how to get their arms around using data effectively, right?
Yes, so I always talk about available, accurate, and actionable data. And many times when we're looking at the problems the pain points we're trying to solve, we have gaps in data. So as soon as you can identify where you have critical missing pieces, it's really about getting it at the speed of relevancy so that you can drive those decisions accurately. We're very good at measuring what we know versus where we actually really want to go. And so clearly defining the end goal, I think, is critical so that you bring in all of the right data points to drive that decision at the speed of relevancy.
I think I'm paraphrasing the former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld correctly when he said there are known unknowns and there are unknown unknowns, and that sounds like kind of the same territory that we're in now. Is that fair to say, Eileen?
It is, but I think that there's been amazing work done to date. It's really about scaling that out as quickly as possible.
How do you go about determining, Nick, where the gaps in your data are? Is it obvious to a data practitioner, I don't know this or I don't have this information? Or does it require maybe more forensic work than that?
Well, it's a really complicated story, I would say. And there was great work that was happening during the first Trump administration. President Trump signed a law called the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act. It included a law called the Open Government Data Act. And one of the really important features of those laws were things like building better data governance structures, including important ways of actually looking at the quality of information that government was collecting so that we could begin to answer these questions in a much more systematic way. Having data inventories and catalogs so the American people could actually know what data government has about them and about businesses and the things that we may actually want to use information from government about. We can't really assess quality systematically if we don't even know what data we have. So government has a long ways to go to really objectively and systematically improve this infrastructure. And while some agencies, Air Force being one of those that had a great chief data officer leading some of this infrastructure, and every federal agency had a chief data officer, has one right now, there are still major gaps in having those data inventories, the catalogs, the data governance processes in place. And I think this is a really strong appeal to say, say we have to lean in on implementing that law, ensuring that open data is available, but also there's loads of information that we actually don't want to be open, that needs to be restricted, protecting the important privacy features, my identity, my social security number, my address, things that shouldn't be made publicly available. But that data still has an inherent value for government activities. And then we need to go in and be able to say, is it high enough quality to be used for particular purposes? And we say, is it fit for purpose? Making a decision about a benefit claim, being able to use it for fraud investigations, a whole variety of things that government and the private sector actually need that data for. So we can use things like the federal data strategy that came out of the first Trump administration. It was issued by Russ Vogt when he was OMB director the first time, and I think is a really great framework to continue leaning in on exactly this idea.
You were nodding your head as he was talking about fit for purpose. Why is that an important term to data practitioners across government?
I think it's important to all leaders that are using data for decision making, because you want to make sure that it's not you have the right context associated with that work. And I go back to that first data strategy really helped, I say, build a baseline to build from. So that's where CDOs across the federal government started to do the first assessments, not just for an organization, but for each component of the organization, because you're always going to have leaders and then fast followers and then other organizations in the group that might need a little bit more assistance, so that you can be a complete ecosystem moving forward, thinking big data enterprise moving forward.
That's a terrific concept to talk about, Eileen, because I had the current chair of the Chief Data Officers Council, Kirsten Dalbo, on the Fed Gov Today podcast not too long ago. And she was talking about that concept of a Chief Data Officers enterprise, results from a survey of the Chief Data Officers Council members and so on. And my takeaway from that was that maybe the most important development is just that ecosystem exists now. The CDOs are talking to each other, they're collaborating together as the other CXOs across government are, and so on. Is that a fair observation on my part?
I love to say data is a team sport. And so how do you leverage your network to maximize? You don't have to start all over again. Take somebody's great work as a springboard to really accelerate value. Because I think it's really about return on investment and value.
I want to take you back, both of you, to that concept that I talked about at the beginning. The agencies are building these systems that will measure all of these payments that organizations are making. How would you, as a chief data officer, measure the success of that at some future point, Eileen?
Well, I think that one of the big components is you have to pass your audit. If the goal is to pass your audit, there are components, and you have to be measuring not just what the finish line is, but every yard on that playing field, and then communicating that to leadership so that you have the executive support that you need to truly accomplish the mission at the speed of relevancy. It can't be way out there. It needs to be as quickly as possible. And I think that is possible with the right executive support to really make it happen.
Nick, 15 seconds. How do you measure success of those systems?
Do we have adequate privacy safeguards to ensure that the data can be used responsibly? And the administration committed to radical transparency. What does that look like, and how's it deployed?
Nick, Eileen, it's great to have both of you on the program. Thanks for joining me.